Hello and welcome back to another prospect breakdown. I'm by myself today, no John. I'm going to be talking about Riley Leonard today. And Leonard is an interesting prospect. Some people think this is a guy that should go undrafted. Others, I know like Nate Tice has been higher on him. So I think it's going to be an interesting guy to break down. Leonard started his career at Duke. He had a lot of success at Duke before transferring to Notre Dame. He left at the same time that his head coach Mike Elko went to Texas A&M, so they had a lot of success together at Duke and then goes to Notre Dame. So we're going to start just by breaking down who Riley Leonard is, go into some clips, talk about how I think those clips kind of summarize him as a player. I'll give my comps for him, and then we'll end with where I think he should be drafted. Leonard is a very physically talented player. He's 6'4", like 210, 220 pounds, somewhere between there. And you can immediately see the athleticism on display when you watch him. Notre Dame used him in the run game a lot, much more than I would hope that a team would try to use him at the next level, because he gets blown up in the run game a lot. They were not just using him as a guy on the perimeter, a scrambler. They ran just power with him. They would run it right up the gut over and over with Leonard, and you saw his physicality on display there. But I also thought he displayed really good vision as a runner. And this is not really a guy you would traditionally look at and just think like this is going to be a big part of his game. He's a longer, lanky guy. He's not, the guy that you would look at and think, oh, this is going to be a super mobile quarterback. But they utilize it a lot, and it helped stabilize their offense throughout the year. Obviously, Notre Dame ends up making the national championship game, and especially on short yardage plays, they went to him a lot on the ground, and he was very comfortable playing that way. He was willing to take hits. You saw even in the Ohio State game, that first drive in the national championship, they ran him over and over and over. He ended up puking on the sideline, and I think that probably impacted his play in the rest of the game. But overall, I think you could see that he was able to take a lot of hits and still perform well throughout the season. So his mentality and his mobility are a big part of his game. But he's also a very good he also has a lot of arm talent. This is a guy, like when you watch the ball, shoots out of his hand. He can throw with some different arm angles. We'll get into some of the negatives of his throwing in a little bit, but he does have some real arm talent to work with here, which is why I think a lot of people were really high on him coming into this year and when he was at Duke, because you saw a lot of the tools that you look for in a good NFL starting quarterback. You saw the athleticism. You saw the ability to make difficult throws. I think even at times he displays some good processing, albeit that's something I think he's going to have to continue to improve upon. So Leonard is a very interesting prospect, but obviously he is not being talked about as a first-round guy, second-round guy. Most people, I don't even think, consider him a guy that will go on day 2. He's a guy that's probably going to have to wait for a while to be picked or even potentially go undrafted. And so let's kind of give an overview for why that's the case. First of all, the decision-making for him sometimes is not completely up to par. He will sometimes choose to bail on plays or try to make something out of nothing when he probably should just, throw the ball away, take what's available to him. And I also think he sometimes struggles in the pocket to move well, to keep his mechanics strong. And then the biggest thing that we'll get into is his accuracy, which is, I think, the biggest concern that I have for him translating to the next level. If you told me his accuracy improves a lot, I would feel very good about Riley Leonard's career in the NFL. So let's dive into some of the strengths a little bit more, and let's start with the throwing. Like I said, I think he has a solid arm. You see the sidearm releases. You see the ability to be on the move and still create throwing windows and see those angles and actually have the talent to deliver the ball in that fashion. I think overall he is not an A-plus arm. He's probably a B-minus arm. At the next level, he certainly has enough there for that not to be his limiting factor, but it's not an arm you look at and say, oh, this is great. And to me, this is actually one of the biggest questions I have with Leonard is on his tape. They did not ask him to throw the ball down the field a ton, and I think part of that is because he was not very accurate down the field. but you don't get to see him just step back and let it rip a lot. A lot of the stuff is shorter. They based a lot of their offense around both the quarterback run game, but also they had great running backs that were able to be efficient for them. So they didn't have to rely on the deep ball to generate explosives for most of the year. And so that's something that you hope to see him continue to get better on, because I think there's still a lot of questions around that from his time in college. On the other side of the throwing, and the biggest concern, like I said, it's the accuracy. Especially down the field, you see misses on his tape where it's just not close. Some guys, they'll miss slightly. We talked in the Cam Ward video about how there are times on like back shoulder throws where the accuracy is not perfect. We're in a completely different world with Leonard. There's balls that are just missed by 5 yards, left or right. There's overthrows. All of that type of stuff shows up on his tape, and it's bad enough where I think you really have to question if that's something that he's ever going to be good at in his career. There's times where you would like to see more touch from him. I think he is a creative player, but much more so in the ability to create arm angles and create windows than in the sense of dropping throws over defenders and things like that. He is sometimes a one-speed thrower and will struggle to get off of that at points. The last thing with the throwing to me that he struggles with is ball placement, and specifically setting guys up for yards after the catch. There are a lot of times where his receivers have to turn backwards or react to a throw that he's made in a way that prevents them from gaining more yards. And especially in the offense they played, they had a decent amount of RPO and a lot of quick game. It makes a big difference, right? That can be the difference in a guy getting a step and beating a defender for a big gain. So overall, you see the arm talent, but there's also some clear drawbacks there that kind of hold you back from considering him to be one of the top passers in this draft class. Overall, to me, his strongest point is the way that he plays, just his mentality. He is extremely tough. He's a very instinctual player. And he also, I think, does operate well going through his progressions quickly when he stays on task, when he doesn't give up on the play early. You can see his ability to work through and read out the play. You just would like to see him stick to that more often. He does well in the RPO. He uses his mobility well in those settings, so he has the ability to take what is like a quick game RPO and also break it off into a run if necessary. And I think you do see more anticipation than he might get credit for. This is not just a guy that has to see somebody come open to make a throw. I thought on some like fade balls and some seam routes, he does a good job of getting the ball out there when he sees that his receiver has a step on a guy and will give him a chance to go make a play, which is a very good sign for him, because I think for him to be a successful NFL quarterback, he's going to have to continue to utilize the arm talent that he has in a more effective way. He's also a very athletic player. He's mobile. He can run both in between the tackles and outside the tackles. I actually think there's times where you see him bounce runs that maybe he doesn't need to, but quarterbacks, you're not expecting them to be the perfect runner. I think overall he shows very good vision, especially in between the tackles. And he has legit speed. He's 6'4". He's a long player and has the ability to eat up ground with his steps. You see a lot of times where defensive linemen, I don't think, understand how quick he moves, and he's able to make them miss and get into the open field and make a play. Overall, I think that's one of his huge strengths and will allow him, if he got thrust into action early in his NFL career, he probably can at least survive back there kind of scrambling around trying to make plays while the rest of his game has to speed up. A couple other things on his mobility. I think he has really good contact balance. You see a lot of times where he'll bounce off hits. He'll keep people from knocking him over on a play where they might just kind of chop at his legs or dive for him and try to make a tackle. He does a really good job of fighting through those, which is a big deal in the way that they used him as a runner. And lastly, I think his stamina is impressive. If you only watch the Ohio State game, you might say otherwise, but with how much they were asking him to do throughout the year in the run game, I think he was a very impressive player in the ability to continue to do that week in and week out. All right, that's most of the good things that he does. Now let's talk about the bad. The decision making at times, the processing. We talked about his unwillingness to sometimes stick with a play. That is one of the biggest issues, and it also concerns me because it felt like their offense was more built like short to long, and you would like to see guys have the ability to go for the explosive and rein it in. I don't know if that's just a way that Notre Dame wanted to play or if that says something about Leonard as a prospect, but you certainly would like to see him target the deep ball more often just to demonstrate that that is a consistent part of his game, because the accuracy there was lacking in the sample size that you get. Sometimes he does rush downfield throws, which overall I think speaks to his tendency to speed up at times when he doesn't necessarily need to. The rush will startle him. It'll move him off his spot when he could have potentially hung in the pocket and made a throw, even in the face of a defender. And there's times where, he just decides he's going to take off, and he's a really good athlete, so you understand why. But at the next level, that's not going to be effective down in and down out. The toughness that he displays also has the flip side, which is he takes a ton of shots, and that's both in the run game and in the pass game. Especially in the run game, he lowers his shoulder a ton, which is understandable because that's kind of what they were asking him to do. But it's hard to translate that to the next level, at least as a starter, because you know that he's not going to do that at the next level if he's a starting quarterback for an NFL team. They're just not going to let him play in that style. If he's a backup, maybe they let you do it, which he's going to be a backup. But you don't necessarily see that as something that's super replicable for him at the next level, at least at the volume that he did it in college. Last thing on the decision making, I think a lot of times he will force throws especially when he feels rushed. He just decides, okay, I've got to get this out. I see a receiver. He's very tightly covered, but I'm just going to try to force it in there. Sometimes that leads to mistakes and interceptions. But overall, I think the biggest concern for me in terms of the decision making is just the pocket movement, where the footwork seems inconsistent. He doesn't necessarily hang in there when you would like to see him do that to continue to read out a play and make a throw. So lastly, on the negatives, the accuracy, again, is a big concern. He is you just see him struggle to do that consistently enough to where you can't just write it off and say this guy has great arm talent. It's something that continues to pop up. So that's a summary of Leonard's game. Overall, you see he has some true strengths that are very good skills for him, but other things that kind of hold him back from being a top prospect. Let's now get into some clips that I think help demonstrate a lot of this skill set. We'll go through 4 clips here. So the first clip here that we're going to look at, the first 2 of the 4 clips are going to be positive. And I'll go into why I think these clips demonstrate some of Leonard's best qualities, and then you'll see the flip side on the other 2 clips. So let's start here. Leonard's going to drop back, and immediately he's going to see pressure around his left side. So he gets around, you see immediately, okay, he's going to have to step up in the pocket, and he's reading out this left side of the field, and he doesn't really have much. You could tell here, not much to work with at this point, but this is where you see both the arm talent a little bit and the instincts come into play. He steps up in the pocket, shuffles, immediately identifies the open receiver that has now come across the field and become available, and he turns his hips, drops the arm angle, makes it a good throw. He actually leads him upfield a little bit, allows him to get his momentum going up to make a play. These are the types of plays when Leonard is operating in rhythm that you see him have success. He's mobile enough where he can create that second window, drop the arm down, make a good throw, and move the sticks. This is when he's at his best, and we're going to see kind of the flip side of that in some later clips. The second clip, I think, is just some of the plus traits from Leonard you're going to see. What Notre Dame is trying to do on this play is, what they end up doing is they end up getting Caleb Downs in conflict. Downs, is responsible for getting this tight end, and as a result, they're able to bring this inside receiver from the trip set across the field, and the linebacker's got to carry him all the way up the field. And that's just a losing matchup, right? If you're able to bring Downs down, make him responsible for this tight end, you can bring this receiver up the field, and he's wide open. But Leonard here, it's not as easy as just looping that up, because as you can see, Leonard faces quick pressure. They bring a linebacker, and he gets home. Leonard gets hit as he throws. But you can see here, he kept his eyes downfield. He still attempted the throw and got it off before he gets hit. And he gets enough on the ball where the receiver can come back to the ball and make a catch. This is a really impressive rep from Leonard. You see the ability to process and understand what he's seeing. You also see the ability to make that throw in the face of pressure, the confidence to make that throw and take the hit. And you see he doesn't even get his full release. As he's throwing this ball, he gets hit. He doesn't even follow through on it, but you can see he's got the arm strength where this ball still travels, 30 yards in the air on a line, enough to where the receiver can still come back and make a play on the ball. You can see the traits and the skill set that at his best allow him to be a really effective quarterback in college, and I think skills that will continue to translate to the NFL. All right, so now let's get into a couple of the negatives with Leonard. On this play here, he's going to start looking left. Here he's going to have this receiver come inside. This is what he wants on this play, but you can see his feet kind of get caught on the defensive back when they're handling this exchange, and the receiver actually ends up stumbling here and falling over. So now Leonard has to audible, right? He has to make an adjustment here, and he actually starts this play off good. He sees what's happened. He says, okay, I've got to get off that. That's not available to me anymore. Well, let me turn and look to the other side of the field and see what I've got. Okay, I've got this guy. He's pretty tightly covered. Not really much here on the check down, but hey, this guy's breaking open on the dig. Well, maybe I could throw that. But you can see this throw ends up being really inaccurate from Leonard, and you'll see why on the end zone copy. Watch the footwork. So at this point here, Leonard identifies, okay, I don't have that. I need to get off this. So at this point, he's starting to read the other side of the field. But his feet are still completely pointed the opposite direction. He's still facing the other side of the field. He never gets those hips turned. And so by the time he comes to make this throw, he's just not in a position to actually get any power on this throw and deliver it accurately. The mechanics to me they're actually the lesser issue. Like, I think usually he is a smooth thrower. The problem to me is the jitters in the pocket, which I think are really what is contributing to this issue, is that he's starting to feel like, I got to speed up here. I got to speed up. I got to get to this other side of the field quickly. I got to make this throw fast, probably expecting pressure to come quickly. And that just causes him to rush that throw. And it ends up being a miss. He doesn't get those hips squared around and does not make an accurate throw. This is something I think if he can improve the way he moves in the pocket and the way he processes across the field, you can see there the mental part is there. He identifies where he needs to end up with the ball. His body placement just doesn't allow him to get there. So that's a place that I think he can continue to make strides and improve. All right, last clip here. Very simple concept here. They're running an RPO. They're going to send this outside receiver up the field, and we're going to bring this receiver out on a little flat route. I think Leonard's keying on this linebacker here. If he stays and he commits to the run, you're going to throw this flat. If he does not, if he goes out and covers, then you can run the ball. So Leonard decides to pull it here, and you see, okay, we've got a pretty good look here. Like, the linebackers stayed in. We've got an outside look. This corner is going to have to trail or have to continue to cover this outside receiver, and this safety is going to be responsible for coming down and making a play. But hey, I like my guy in space there, right? This is not an easy throw because you do have to get the ball over this linebacker. Make sure you carry your receiver out enough to the sideline where this guy can't undercut this and make a play on the ball. But this is a throw I think Leonard can make and does have the arm talent to execute this. But instead, he eats it. He doesn't make the throw. He decides, I'm going to try to scramble. This is against Georgia, right? I don't think that's going to end up very well for him. Ends up trying to make a play. He actually does fight for some extra yards here, which is not surprising because he finds a way to do that on a ton of plays, and it really helps him as a runner. So you can even see a little bit of his positive characteristics on this play. But overall here, you'll see it from the end zone angle. Goes out, thinks about the throw, and just decides to eat it. Those are the plays where you would just like to see Leonard play more aggressively, trust what he is seeing, and deliver on the throw. Because when he does, he is a very effective player and has the talent to make those type of throws. So with him, I think the biggest opportunities for improvement, if he can continue to trust what he is seeing, trust his arm talent, and become a more effective and accurate thrower, that to me is where he could continue to rise and become a better player, because a lot of the traits are there. It's just not all the way there yet. So let's get to comps. I'll give a couple comparisons for who I think that Leonard could end up being in the NFL, and then I'll finish with my grade for him. First, I think best case, I like doing best case and worst case for players. Best case to me for Leonard, let's say things go right. He becomes more accurate. His footwork gets cleaned up. The guy who reminds me the most is actually a guy that also was a Duke Blue Devil at one point, which is Daniel Jones. Jones, much maligned at times, going to have to find a new home at quarterback after some struggles with the Giants the past few years. But at his best was a guy that was, about an average NFL quarterback. I think at Leonard's best case, that's probably the type of guy that you're looking at. But I think some of his skill set is very similar to Jones. Jones is also a guy that if you watched walk into the stadium, you would not think has any speed, but he actually can move pretty well. And the Giants started to utilize him more as a physical runner, especially in the year where they made the wild card game. That's the type of play that you can have with a guy that's as athletic as Jones or as Leonard, but he's not a guy that looks like he's going to be that type of player. Jones has never been the cleanest player. He makes mistakes. He's not the most accurate quarterback. I think that is the type of player where if Leonard can continue to improve, he reminds me a lot of Daniel Jones. As a worst case, I like the Daniel Jones comp. I think that is the most accurate. As a worst case, I also had Josh Dobbs because Dobbs to me is a player that very just relies on scrambling and making something happen. He's not really going to beat you from the pocket very often. He's not the most accurate, and he's not a plus athlete, but he's good enough to kind of make some plays. And he's really at his best when he's coming in as a backup and the defense doesn't know what to expect. They haven't really prepared for him. He can make some plays, but he's never going to be effective week in and week out. So to me, that's kind of Riley Leonard's more likely outcome. To me, is a backup at the NFL level that is athletic enough to come in and make plays, but probably is never able to refine his skill set enough to be a true effective starting quarterback in the NFL. So let's conclude with the grade for Leonard. I see Leonard as a 4th-round prospect. I think I would be comfortable taking him at that point, especially if I'm a team that's looking for a backup with some high-end potential starter upside at some point. To me, the 4th round is where you start looking at guys that you don't really foresee becoming a starter, but hey, maybe there's a chance that they do. They at least have the traits where it could happen. And below that, 3rd round, 2nd round guys, you're probably hoping they eventually do become a starter. You're just not expecting them to become a high-end guy. So to me, Leonard is a guy, he has enough traits where I think he can survive as a backup. I do see enough on the film for that. And I do think that he has the ability to continue to improve on those. And you see, he was a multi-sport athlete. He has a background where I could see development continuing to happen. And if it does, maybe you found yourself an average starter. So I see him as a 4th-round prospect. I'm probably higher on him than most people. I think a lot of people see him as a late-round guy. I do like Leonard as a player. I think he shows a lot, and the athletic skill set leaves enough to where you're intrigued with a guy like this. So that's going to do it for today's episode. Hopefully we'll have John back soon to cover some of the more highly regarded guys at the top of the class. But if you didn't watch the Cam Ward episode, that was the first one that we came out with this draft cycle. So go back and watch that. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple on YouTube, that'll all be available on the same channel as well. So thanks for watching.